Hey, good evening, everyone. Mike Shrews here at the Antler Collector, and I hope y'all are having a fantastic evening. I'm going to tell you a story going back into the mid '90s. A few of my friends in the antler world know this story, but it's quite amazing. I'm going to try to make this not real long. So back in the mid '90s, there was a horticulture farm not too far from where I lived, and I was working at the time. And my mom, at the time I was living at home, my mom had told me, she said, Mr. Lundgren's trying to get a hold of you about a big deer. And I said, okay. But I was real busy working during the day and then late into the night, and I didn't have time to really get a hold of them. And truthfully, deer weren't really on my mind at the moment. They were some, but not like they should have been. Well, I finally get a hold of him, but it was probably a month and a half later, and he said, man, you should have been down here. He said there was this enormous whitetail buck coming into the orchard down here, eating apples every evening, and he said it's a stunted deer. I was like, what do you mean stunted? He said it had these little bitty short legs and this enormous whitetail rack. And I'm like, wow, that sounds crazy. Well, fast forward, I never did make it down there. Fast forward into the hunting season. I was hunting my grandpa's place and killed a real nice buck that year. And one night in particular, I decided to run into Dairy Queen in Manhattan, Kansas, and get a strawberry milkshake. So I'm flying down the road, and about 7 miles down the road, there's a gravel loop that comes off, and there's a field, about a 15-acre field or so, in the middle of that gravel loop, and there was two houses on the outside of that loop. Well, I normally would kind of slow down and I'd like pull into that gravel loop. I'm heading north. I'd pull into that gravel loop and let my lights shine over. Well, they shined over and I could see something up there. So I stopped and I think I had my brights on or whatever. And if I didn't, I would have turned my brights on. I grabbed my binoculars and I'm looking. And I'm like, I could see something off the side of the road, 40, 50 yards. And I'm going to say they were probably 200 yards up there from my headlights. And I'm like, with the binoculars, I'm like, it looks like an elk standing there. And I'm looking, I'm like, that can't be a rack on that deer's head. And it was a whitetail buck. He was at the ass end of a doe, and he was going like this. He kind of doing that. I don't know if he's just smelling her or what. So it was kind of, the lighting wasn't bright, but I could just make out this enormous looking, peering like an elk rack. So I drive up the road, and there was a driveway up here, and I made kind of a mental mark as I pulled away roughly where it was at, and I shine out there. And I look out there and I'm like, oh my God. 50 yards off the road or whatever. I look out there and I'm like, I cannot believe the size of this rack. It dwarfed this body. Unbelievable. This enormous typical frame deer just standing there with those black eyes. I say black, at the moment that the lights weren't in his face, and it was just this humongous rack just looking right at the road. He was right there with a doe. And to his left was another, nice buck. I didn't realize how big it was until I found these sheds. And so I'm looking at this one. I'm like, that is unbelievable looking. I grab my binoculars and I'm looking out there at him. And I was like, man, is that another deer behind him? And I'm looking because I could see eyes. It looked like eyes. What it was the tips of his brow tines were polished white. And they were all the way up in the middle of his rack, like 13, 14 inches up there. And when he turned his head to look at this buck, which was about 40 yards from him, he turns and I see it just illuminated the whole sides of his brows. And I was like, oh my God, look at those brow tines. This enormous typical. So I'm just looking out for, like maybe like 30, 40 seconds. I'm like, that is just unbelievable. In my mind, I'm not registering what I'm really looking at. I truly believe it was a world record by 10 inches. I mean, seriously. And it was a 5x5. So I'm looking at him, and he's getting nervous, but he did not want to leave that doe. All of a sudden, he just decides to just take off running with that gigantic, enormous rack. So I turn and I start driving. I can see him in the peripheral of my right side. And I watch him just run right in front of me, just right in front of me. And he jumps the fence. And when he went right in front of me, on his left G2, I could see one little tiny sticker about that long. That was the only sticker I could see on that rack. So he jumps the fence and he's gone. The next night, I go down there, same time roughly. I did get my strawberry milkshake, by the way. Anyway, so the next night I go back down there, shine out there. He's out there. Unbelievable with that doe. Keep in mind, like I said, I'd already killed, I think I said in the beginning, I'd killed a really nice buck that year on my grandpa's place. And this was during rifle season. This deer was out here with this doe. And it was about, 8:30 at night. Well, so I go down there again. He's out there. I get a better look at him. I'm looking at this deer, 60, 70 yards off the road. I had my spotlight. It's legal as long as you got permission on this place, on the places down there. And I knew everybody on the creek. I'm shining on this deer, and all I just see is this enormous, beautiful, white, tine, giant buck. Seriously, guys, this deer had 13 to 15 inch brows. He had 17, 18 G2s. They were so unbelievably gigantic. They weren't thin. They were thick with ridges going up them. I remember seeing the left one here. I'll tell you in a second, the left one. The inside spread, I was guesstimating between 28 and 32 inches. I know these numbers sound ridiculous, but I'm telling you, I believe what I saw was a world record. Right before we started this, I did a quick sketch, and it was wider than this, definitely, but this is just the style of rack it had. I'll just set that there while I kind of tell the story. And so he after about a minute, he actually didn't want to leave that doe. He kept like just not wanting to leave her. Well, this buck here was there again, and he chased that buck off. After he did that, he just didn't. He wasn't right next to the doe, and so he ran the exactly same route that he went the day before. I shined a light on that deer. He ran right in front of me, 10 feet. The size of the rack was so gigantic, it looked like a giant mule deer. I watched him jump the fence. He ran right by an old windmill. And as he's running by the windmill, I remember thinking, my God, that rack's as wide as the base of that windmill, which it wasn't, but I'm just saying, it was just so big. I shined that thing 150 yards on him as he ran away, just this tower of tall tines. Real quick, the next night, I go down there, he's there, and as soon as he saw the light, he was in the middle of the field, a little further out there. As soon as he saw the light, he took off running, and I never saw that buck again. I looked so hard for sheds that year, but I don't know if that deer, where he came from, he was just an absolute world-class typical. He had one maybe 1.5 2 inch sticker off his left G2. I could not see any non-typicals on his base or nothing. The animal's left G1 had a curlicue in it, just like the top of a little McDonald's ice cream cone, just whoop, like that. And it was a unbelievably beautiful typical. This deer here, now, so there's the typical I believe I seen, which was a world record. This deer here was with him, within a distance. This here, I found these that same year during the shed season. They were 100, the same year he had these on his heads when I seen that world record possible deer. These here, I mean, he made this look like 130 inch deer. These have 28 inch beams, a little over. They're a 10 point, they're 183 on the 5x5 frame. and just, these are big. They're 19 tall. It dwarfed this. When I tell you dwarfed, it dwarfed this animal. It made him look like a dink. So I can't help but think he had brows this long, the big one. He had G2s that were just so big. They just were up here, just enormous tines. I've wrote it down, and I'm getting 105 typical each side with a 28-inch spread, 26 minimum on this deer. He was so big and wide. Even 26, and even if they're hundreds a piece, that's 226 with any reasonable side to side, which he wasn't. I can't picture there being much more than even 6 inches. Would have been a 219 net 5x5, but truthfully, you want my honest opinion, I think this deer was a 235-inch 5x5 that netted in the upper 220s. I think he was a deer that was a total freak of nature, like the Minnesota Monarch, that just grew an extreme rack of typical proportions. So I truly believe it was the same deer that Mr. Lundgren, who worked for the horticulture farm, was seeing. He told me it was after all this, I talked to him quite a bit. He said it was a huge, tall rack typical that had little bitty short legs and a huge rack, and I just can't help but think that it was this deer. Moving forward, 4 years later, keep in mind, I door knocked every house in that area for years. Every house I put out, I talked to so many people, made so many phone calls. Never a set of sheds or nothing materialized. 4 years later, my buddies and I, a bunch of girlfriends, were headed to the movies, and we were driving my black Lincoln town car. I had a black Lincoln, big 4-door car, just chilling on the old. And we shined out in the field. I actually wasn't driving. Justin, my buddy, was. He shined out there, and here was this giant buck, this huge rack. But we was way out there. We could just see this big rack. So he held the spotlight on it, and my buddy and I, Clint, ran out there. We ran right in line with the spotlight, right out to this deer, and we're 30 yards from it. This enormous monster, 13-inch brows. All it was a 3x3. It had huge 3x3 rack. And I told my buddy, I said, dude, that's the deer. He's like, what deer? I'm like, that's the giant I seen 4 years ago. I know it is. I can tell. I truly believe it was him. This deer was probably 25, 26 inside, a giant 3x3. Well, if my memory serves me right, a bow hunter stuck this deer. Stuart Valentine ended up buying the rack, and it was like a 163-inch 3x3 that was 26 inside, net in the upper 150s, an enormous deer. But I just, that shape and them brows were very similar. Obviously, they're going to change with time, but truly, I believe it was him. Just gone downhill. Anyway, that's kind of my story for the night. So we're already at 13 minutes. Jamie, Christmas time flies when you're talking about this stuff. But that's my story for tonight. Saw a deer. These are 183-inch 5x5s. These were absolutely dwarfed. These are 19 tall. That other deer, I'm telling you, had to be 22 to 23 tall, maybe 24. He was just so out of this world for size. I've never seen nothing like it to this day. Probably never will. It was just a freak of nature. But I want to hear your story. I want to hear something you saw. I would love for you to put in the comments a story about seeing. You don't have to tell any details where. You can tell the state. This was Kansas. It ain't going to make a difference. No one's going to know. But I would love to hear what's your biggest typical or not typical that you've ever seen. That was definitely my biggest typical. I've never seen nothing like it. Just so unreal. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this. You all have a wonderful night. Good luck hunting. And if I don't see you on another video here, happy Thanksgiving. Take care. Thank you.